Welcome, Midgardians and all, to the first game review for 2023. As winter prepares his worst around this time of year, our protagonists return after 4 years to brace Fimbulvinter's never-ending storm, as Ragnarok is just upon the horizon. Without missing a step, let's dive right into the sequel brought to us by Santa Monica Studio, God of War, Ragnarok. This sequel picks up from the tail end of God of War 2018, where Baldur's death by the hands of Kratos marks the coming of Ragnarok. And everybody who is an Asgardian god is pissed, particularly at this ashy fellow and his meddling son, who's been sneaking off without Kratos' knowledge to find Tyr, the Norse God of War, who plays an important part in uniting the realms, as according to prophecy, against Odin and inevitably stopping Ragnarok. Little does Atreus knows, his meddling has been noticed by Odin Corleone, to which Don Odin comes to Kratos with a peace offer he can't refuse, to which Kratos refuses. While Kratos is now on every Asgardian god's hit list, Atreus is making his Stop Ragnarok list and checking every Jotnar shrine he comes across twice to gain info on the prophecies that are predicted to take place during Ragnarok. Knowing that they're going to need all the help they can get, Atreus pleads to the pissed off ex-wife of the Dawn to join Team Kratos, to which she later accepts under one condition. However, upon one of Atreus' nap times, he meets a mysterious giant Tess named Angerboda, who is the current art director of these Jotnar shrines across the realms. Finding out more knowledge on his heritage as a half-giant, Atreus, aka Loki, soon discovers a shrine kept hidden from him that prophesies his two things. One, he will become a made man by working for Odin Corleone, and two, Kratos is going to die. Determined to see neither prophecy come true, Atreus switches his goal from stopping Ragnarok to saving his father, albeit on his own terms, not fate. Alright, first thing first, why is this game hitting me with a wave of emotions? Give me a moment, please. It's only been 10 minutes into the game. Oh my god, it's Freya from the top rope with emotional damage! By god! Ragnarok starts off on such an emotional high and battle intense note that I sat on the edge of my seat longing for the game to keep upping itself. The moment I fell off that edge, the Thor fight. Do you know how long it's been since a game had a moment where it breaks the fourth wall through the game's own mechanics? Metal Gear Solid is smiling like a proud parent. This moment also sealed the deal with pulling me into this brutal world that longs to remind Kratos that he doesn't belong here, while I reminded the world through controlling Kratos that Kratos has the energy of a honey badger. As I progressed through the game, however, I was taken aback to see that there is more to this story than the high thrills of combat, action, and Mimir's endless stories. It's the moments where we get to see the vulnerable side of these powerful beings that struck more of a chord with me. Of course, the relationship that is the center of this game is Kratos and Atreus. However, it evolves from its sprout-like beginnings in God of War 2018, where Kratos barely had an attachment with Atreus, and a younger Atreus was rash, bit off more than he could chew, and finding out about his supernatural lineage made him grow a head bigger than Mimir's. In Ragnarok, we get to see how the deeper their bond becomes, the more they evolve like humans, and the less they seem as gods. Kratos becomes more concerned the more mature and independent Atreus tries to be. Atreus, in return, becomes more appreciative of his father, the more he realizes despite all the stupid decisions he believed were good, all the mistakes he's made, and all the lies he told, Kratos is there to not just catch him, but coach him on how to deal with the consequences that comes with those actions, like a loving father would.
But you don't believe in any of it.
And still, I follow. Because all that matters is that you are safe.
God of War Ragnarok does a great job not only humanizing these gods, but writing them with a contemporary spin that we can pinpoint certain people or events within the game that reminds us of our own human experiences. We all know what it's like to feel those butterflies when talking to a crush. We know what it's like to worry for our loved ones, especially when we can't physically be in their corner, or the death of a loved one that can either bring family together or take you to a dark place where you're not sure if you can ever find that happiness again. There is another family outside of Kratos and Atreus, albeit this one spotlights and focuses around a father-son dynamic soaked in toxicity, one where the father figure sees his family as mere pawns to achieve his goals. One of these pawns in which I dedicate this song to. Here's the story of the God of Thunder. He He has a wife, 2 sons, and a daughter too. An alcoholic who Odin sees his muscle, pissed at his sons got slaughtered. The all-knowing and the all-smarter, on a quest for nothing else but wisdom, cursing his wife, killing giants, and he's dropping peace under his order. Till the one day where Thor realized from all father, less than game or killing, now time to go drink. He wanted nothing more than his approval, defying Odin is why Thor got mink. Asgardians, that's the way they became Asgardians. If Norse mythology had a camera crew, the Asgardian gods would have their own show on TLC with how fucked up this family is. The biggest victim of it being Thor. What I like about Odin and Thor's dynamic is that they're somewhat of a parallel with Kratos and Atreus, specifically Atreus and Thor. They're both redheads, they're both giants, and most importantly, they are the right-hand man of their fathers, a role we associate with given to the most trusted. Granted, Atreus being an only child gives him this position by default, but still, Atreus is Kratos' right-hand man because Kratos loves him. As for Thor, it shines the darkest side of his relationship with Odin. If Odin really wanted to choose the right-hand man out of love, then this Jared Leto-looking bastard would be in that spot. But he's not. Heimdall may have unwavering support for Odin, but even being a fanatic runs the risk of possibly having those strong emotions used against you. For someone like Odin, who is calculating and prefers to manipulate people, that's a disadvantage. Thor is different because Thor is not trusted out of love. Odin trusts Thor's usefulness. Thor knows he's good at killing. It's where Odin puts his worth in him. Thor also knows that if he's not doing Odin's bidding, then Odin wants nothing more to do with him. He's dismissed until Odin wants him to do a job for him. Hell, he even starts putting Atreus over Thor because of the fact that Atreus lines up with his self-interest. Later on, this toxic relationship between the two starts to seep into Thor's strained relationship with his wife Sif, who sees for herself that Odin is putting his selfish goals above her and Thor's desire to avenge their sons Magni and Modi. Which leads me to another tiny tidbit that I enjoyed seeing in this game. The notable characteristics of these gods have been modified to fit the game's interpretation of these gods. When it comes to Thor, he's known to be someone who loves to drink. However, in this God of War's interpretation of him, he drinks to cope with being a disappointment of a father that couldn't avenge his sons, and feeling like a disappointment of a son who will never be seen as an equal in Odin's eyes, despite his reputation as a ruthless god. The gameplay of Ragnarok is a pretty heavy overhaul from the previous title. I think the word to use to describe the improvements is galore, as in a galore of puzzles, a galore of mini-boss fights, and a galore of side quests, in comparison to its prequel, resulting in a galore of side content you can engage in that's easily double the amount of content in God of War 2018. Also new to the sequel is all 9 realms can now be visited. The majority of them traversable, while others like Niflheim are more static and contain unique stipulations to complete, like finding all of Odin's ravens. Speaking of enemies, there is a galore variety when it comes to them, specific types occupying but not limited to certain realms. I found the diverse amount of enemies a nice encouragement to make players switch up their playstyle from time to time, which I will discuss further in this next section coming up. The combat system in Ragnarok makes the combat from the previous game look like child's play with the amount of customization that has been added. There is so much you can do to build your ultimate Kratos according to your own playstyle that it can be a bit overwhelming for those of you playing a God of War game for the first time. For starters, weapon attachments, armor sets, and the skill tree return, though not without some differences. The Leviathan Axe and Blades of Chaos are back at Kratos' side with a new weapon to join Kratos' arsenal, the Draupnir Spear, which also has its own set of various attachments and runic attacks. There are also more runic summons divided between Atreus and now as a comadre, Freya. Freya's initiation into Team Kratos is accompanied with her having her own skill tree where her skills can be upgraded in addition to Atreus and Kratos. Bringing up Kratos, now on his skill tree, you are rewarded for your mastery of moves by being granted a perk that is attached onto that move when it is used. You want more invisibility frames? Not a problem. A damage buff? Slap that baby in there. Unfortunately, the trade-off for this massive combat expansion is that there is no unique skill tree for bare hand combat nor shield skills anymore. But I wouldn't consider that a massive negative, considering that now you gain a new character you can play as the boy himself. Atreus moves so different from Kratos that switching between the two really feels like day and night. While Kratos is bigger and stronger, you can certainly feel how he's somewhat more sluggish when controlling him after Atreus, who, despite being smaller and leaner, moves with a snap, has a disruptive parry, and dishes out some considerable damage himself. I actually enjoyed playing as Atreus more than Kratos, due to Atreus' quick archer playstyle was new, different, and checked most of the boxes when it comes to my preferred playstyle. As much as I enjoyed traveling the 9 realms, this journey was not entirely smooth, with a few hiccups arriving within my travels. The first of which being how much this game backseats you to infinity and beyond.
What about freezing the geyser under the wheel?
There were too many instances where I got told the answer to the puzzles right as I was on the heels of the answer clicking for me, or even worse, right as soon as I practically start the puzzle. You would think the game would release with an option to mute or minimize hints, right? Wrong. And it wasn't just puzzles they backseated, they also backseated me during the fights, Atreus, Mimir, and Freya, and it got so fucking irritating that I started to argue back with them. I understand that some people are slow on the uptake when it comes to puzzles, and that's fine, but at least make it an option choice as to whether or not you want to receive hints. I can only speak for myself when I say that Dr. Kawashima trained me well at a very young age. Another critique I have is how odd the power scaling is in this game. Maybe it has to do with my somewhat novice experience with playing God of War, since the Norse Saga of God of War is my first time playing and getting into this franchise. But the fact that I have completed the first Thor fight on Give Me God of War, yet the fighters were a harder fight than him, was an erratic experience to have. Like, these fighters get away with the cheapest of shit you would have thought they owned a Dollar General. Gangs of acid fish taking chunks of my health away, the Blue Man Group people throwing Bifrost on me every chance they get, Draugrs launching Hadokens from across the screen, elves throwing light grenades, barbarians wanting to freeze me to death, and you have to deal with this shit while fighting mobs of them. Meanwhile, I'm in the middle of a combo, but my combo apparently means nothing to basic enemy number 69, and they proceed to attack me through my animation. Thinking that parrying will give me an advantage, I'm greeted with another follow-up attack that is also parryable, or a combo that I have to entirely parry that ends with an unblockable attack. I complete one Berserker fight and felt like I was fighting a boss. Then when I attempted a second Berserker fight and saw I had to fight 3 enemies at once, yeah, I put in my letter of resignation as the God of War. Oh, by the way, before anyone goes, well, you can use your partner to back you up and keep pressure off of you. To that I say, at least Atreus somewhat does his part. But my beef is with Freya, because for me, Freya just stands there 90% of the time preying on my downfall as I am completely surrounded, with a cigarette in her hand. My final critique has to do with the structure of the story and its pacing. The pacing slows incredibly down from the climactic high the game begins on, and feels like a drag around the middle. Specifically the Vanaheim, Ironwoods, and the Find the Mass Piece sections. Don't get me wrong, these sections are integral in giving exposition as well as developing the relationship between certain characters. But these parts felt like they way overstayed their welcome more than they should have. And I can pinpoint sections within these 3, but it does not limit the game to these 3 that could have been cut or condensed to still deliver the impact they provide to the story. As far as the story and its development, it is inconsistent. The goalpost keeps awkwardly shifting and changing to the point where preventing Ragnarok didn't feel like a lingering threat that we needed to stop at all costs. Instead, it shifts into Atreus wanting to save Kratos from dying, then working for Odin, then back to wanting to do nothing but preventing Ragnarok because of shit that pops off, only to then decide after getting a pep talk from your dead wife in a flashback to go to war with Odin. On top of that, the weird plot twist that Ragnarok isn't an event, instead it's Surtur hitting Super Saiyan God form from sniffing one of Kratos' blades of chaos. It felt like the grave concern for Ragnarok that the game started off with faded into the background while the characters' interactions with one another became the main focus of the game. There were times where I sat there and went, okay, but like, Ragnarok, are we stopping it or nah? I don't know this for sure, but I got the feeling when I made it to the end of Ragnarok that this Norse mythology arc in Kratos' story should have been a trilogy. So many new characters were introduced in this game alone that the game was trying to spotlight their particular dynamics and conflicts and give them character development, but most of them didn't get the resolution or proper development that they deserve. This is a game about gods, and yes, while I enjoyed the approach of humanizing these gods, they are still gods. Perhaps they were humanized too much that their presence fell flat, more with their saving grace being providing exposition and character development for the story. The way Kratos was so staunchly against going to war with Odin for a majority of the game, even up to the war section, yet a flashback of his wife decides to make him change his mind suddenly, was odd. The war itself, don't get me started, because I felt nothing.
I do not want this war.
I felt no triumph in defeating Odin. I didn't feel the heavy weight of a war that was unfolding before my eyes because the story stripped the war of its gravity. It's a war! It also didn't help that in comparison to the rest of the game, the war section has significantly less screen time than one would expect playing a game called God of War. And the Norse Saga is my first time ever playing a God of War game. These elements certainly needed another game to give them time to be expanded more upon and fleshed out further. And a few characters, I would argue in retrospect, would have benefited more from being briefly introduced in 2018 in the same manner as Thor was, so that leading into Ragnarok, they were given enough space for their inclusion to have a better impact as the story progressed. Now we have reached the final part of this review. Does this game deserve to feast in the finest halls of Valhalla, or be buried in the heartless cold of Helheim? My answer is, like Kratos and Atreus, God of War Ragnarok has made itself a home in Midgard. Naturally, I would recommend God of War Ragnarok to those of you who played the previous game and want to see Kratos' and Atreus' journey in Yggdrasil concluded, or if you are someone who wants to play a more narrative-focused game. Would I go out of my way to tell people they must play God of War Ragnarok? Not really. There is a huge emphasis on the narrative and characters than ever before. That God of War Ragnarok does feel like an interactive movie in the same style that most modern AAA title single-player games have gone, which for some games are a plus, but for a series like God of War, it kind of feels somewhat out of place. Outside of Kratos, there was really nothing about God of War Ragnarok that made God of War feel unique and have its own identity. It plays like his fellow Sony AAA title games, and well, now that I'm approaching that line, that's the issue I've been having lately with the Sony AAA games I have played. They all play relatively the same way, that although their artistic directions may differ, the structure of the games don't feel different from one another. And instead of feeling like games designed to be games that tell great narratives, they feel more like games designed to have great narratives that can be adapted into film or TV later on. I'm pretty indifferent with Ragnarok in that while I find the narrative and themes fantastic in exploring family, relationships, and old man Kratos finally finding his peace, the game felt safe. Like Marvel movie safe. So safe that even the delivery of the game's twist is similar to the backseating you have to endure. On the plus side, Ragnarok is larger in size than its prequel. However, it felt like Ragnarok overindulged in some departments than necessary. But perhaps it was done so to solidify Santa Monica Studios' stance in the new direction they want to take God of War from this point forward. Regardless, God of War Ragnarok marks the end of our time with Team Kratos. An in-game hint indicates that there is more world mythology to explore from other parts of the world to continue Kratos's and now beginning Atreus' sagas as gods dwelling amongst gods. Something tells me the world of Yggdrasil may make its return, now with Atreus seeking to find the Jotnar giants, but it won't be the focus anymore. A bittersweet feeling as I've known about the God of War franchise during its PS2 days, with the Norse Saga being my introduction to finally playing a God of War game. Fortunately, this is just another chapter of Kratos' epic closed as we patiently wait for the next chapter to be written. Until the next review, stay safe, stay healthy, and remember, fate does not have control of your destiny, you do. Thanks for watching.